Of all the Eagles' 2020 draft picks, I think I've had the most questions surrounding Southern Mississippi's Quez Watkins, a receiver drafted in the 6th round who, believe it or not, shockingly ran a 4.35 40-yard dash time, perfectly fitting the mold of a speedster, which the Eagles seem to really crave from every single receiver added over that weekend. But the question is Quez Watkins a lock to make this roster? There is plenty of traffic at the wide receiver position right now, and if you go back to other picks around that same sort of range, someone like Shelton Gibson springs to mind out of West Virginia, a 5th round pick who also fit that niche but was unable to ever quite get it together during his first run with the team. Does Quez Watkins have a higher ceiling? Why did he slip to the 6th round, and what can we expect from him as a rookie, at least this summer? My name is Liam Jenkins, and this is another episode of Eagles Film Room. Before we get started, as always guys, make sure you leave a like and hit that subscribe button if you do enjoy this content and are new around here. It means everything to us that you take time out of your days to watch our content, and if you're not already getting your daily dose of Philadelphia sports coverage from myself and all of our writers at phillysportsnetwork.com, then what are you waiting for? Go onto the website. There are new articles every single day trying to change the way that your favourite sports teams are reported on. So who is Quez Watkins? Well, he's 6 foot, 185 pounds, and although he's young and slightly raw, he's actually a back-to-back All-Conference USA first team honoree. He led the conference in yards per game with 107 last year, ending 2019 with 1,178 receiving yards, and in doing so, became the 8th receiver in program history to hit that 1,000 mark in a single season. He also led the team with 19 plays of 20 plus yards, which, as we know from the drafting of Rager and Hightower, have been key areas of focus. It's also very important to note that Carson Wentz ranked 9th on such plays last year, despite having, well, no deep threats whatsoever. This much speed is truly terrifying on offense, and his production shouldn't be overlooked. Eagles to gain a receiver of that caliber so late in the draft is certainly noteworthy, and the other aspect I think as well is that he's already working out with Jalen Hurts. They worked out together before the NFL draft, and he has a firm bond with the former Oklahoma Sooner. Said on a conference call that after he was drafted, Jalen Hurts actually texted him and said, "Let's get to work." So I'm a big fan of that, alright. I'm already expecting a preseason breakout like no other, but what exactly can we expect when preseason rolls around? Alright, let's dive into the first part of the route tree. Obviously, it's the release, and this is something I want to talk about because he doesn't face press coverage a lot, and he does need some work to get off of press a lot cleaner, but when he's matched up with some open space to work with, he can do a lot of damage. Obviously, DBs don't want to line up against a 4.35 wide receiver in press. If they get beat, it's going to be game over, so they do play it off quite a lot. But Quez is an intelligent route runner. Just take a look at this out route here against Jackson State, who uses his body and his head so well to sell the vertical, the DB almost trips over because he sells that so well. We saw the same sort of thing with John Hightower. Quez isn't as subtle with it. You can see those jab steps are a little more aggressive, but he's still able to carve that separation, adjust to the ball on a timing route. It's great to see. This play, I wouldn't worry too much about the throw. It's a poor throw from the quarterback. What we want to see is the stem of this route, which is very impressive. He's working against the soft zone, and you can see him leverage himself against that nickel cornerback, just kind of pushing one way, then gliding back across his face while the DB's eyes are fixed in the backfield. Again, don't really worry about the throw here. It was terrible. I want to focus on the route. He does have some nice little tools up his sleeve, like that kind of stutter step we saw in the stem of that route enables him to generate just enough separation to go out and snag that ball out of clean air. The problem is, for someone with a 4.35 40, he doesn't generate separation as easily as you might imagine, and I think that was reflected in a slightly disappointing 3-cone drill, that initial agility just isn't quite there, and that leads me to the gearing, what I like to call. So you're talking about the ability to accelerate through the gears, and as opposed to going 0 to 100, able to leverage that speed. I feel like you see it in some cases with Watkins and you don't see it in others, and that's maybe to me why he was on the lower echelon of this draft, because there are instances like this play against Wright where he catches the ball in a relatively closed space but somehow is able to get to the sideline and then turn upfield, showing he can get through the gears. There's another example here where you can almost just see him catch it in the open zone, come to a complete standstill and really watch him fly. Like, that speed is utterly ridiculous. That you can see why the Eagles fell in love with him. but it's not consistent. And you get that theme again with other attributes of his play, like getting off of press coverage, like generating separation through the stem. He's definitely a project wide receiver, but there are those raw attributes there. And when they flash, they are absolutely blinding because he can slow down into cuts and burst out of them. But again, sometimes he struggles if he starts really quickly going into a comeback or something to slow his body down without taking extra steps or without almost oversetting that body weight. So there are some attributes in his route running that could absolutely need some polishing at the next level, and that's where Aaron Moorhead is going to come in. But if you can just get him on a drag or a slant or a corner where he can work through his own defense and find those pockets of space, he is absolutely going to do some damage. Now this one here, for instance, if he's got a lot of blockers in front of him, then he's going to take it to the house every time. There isn't much you can do to stop a receiver of that speed level. But what if he can't do that every time? What if he has to high point a ball? What if it's a dead route at the top of the tree? Let's see where he fares in these sort of situations. And that for me is where Hightower won that well-rounded tree. He really became this well-rounded receiver at a budget value. Watkins can do it. He can climb the rungs of the ladder, go up and snag some really sexy passes out of the air. What you'll notice though, again, separation is at a minimum on a lot of those routes. Many of those high pointed balls are absolutely contested catches where the DB gets in there, and you can see sometimes that when the DB gets physical, whether it's at the line, whether it's at the catch point, he can end up coming off worse in those situations. This throw against Tulane was massively overthrown. He still does make an effort to go up and grab it, but there are two very similar plays that go to that corner of the end zone, and both of them end up being incompletions. Now yes, both were overthrown, but the Watkins effort is what we're looking at here, and does he adjust well enough? At this point, he's looking back for the ball. He has to understand now, right, I've got a DB in my hip pocket, I've got to try and box him out. Maybe that decision just took a little too long to make. At the end of the day, I'm putting that on the throw though, not the high pointed catch attempt, unlike this one where against slightly weaker competition, he can box that defender out, he can jump up, use that range and bring that ball down. That's what you want to see on a regular basis. That's what I would love to see from him. That's what you get from Hightower consistently. You don't quite get it all the time with Watkins, and that's why to me he did go around later, where he may be the more accomplished receiver in terms of yardage, but overall there's a little bit of inconsistency there. Like this one against UAB is a sensational catch. He goes up, corner of the end zone, nice little fade, hops up. Like what a great jumping catch that was to get over the DB, to high point that ball, uses both hands, gets it over his head away from the corner. That's everything you could want. And what I think goes directly hand in hand with that is his ball tracking, and something that was referenced a little bit earlier on, whether it's over the shoulder or over the back, whatever it may be. I feel like he can do it. Again, he's shown it on many different plays. This was definitely one of them against Tulane. Working against a slightly bigger DB, can't quite get the separation, but looks for the ball, tracks it well over his shoulder and is able to catch it in the bucket. That is a perfect catch by the young wide receiver. There's another great shout here against Western Kentucky, where the DB actually almost falls into him, and at that point you just don't want to lose balance. He doesn't, snags that ball down and makes a big time catch. This may be one of the most impressive examples of that coming up against Tulane, because there's such crowding around this ball. Not only was the catch impressive, but look at the route a little more closely, and again, like we saw earlier, he's able to sell one way, push inside past the DB the other, and make a tremendous reception. He's really able to anticipate the throws and wonder where they're going to be. Those over the shoulder catches are rarely an issue against similar level competition. It's when you get to some of the higher levels that they do start to haunt him a little bit, and he's not quite as accurate. Maybe he doesn't have that step. There's another great example in the end zone there where he actually calls in a touchdown against Marshall. Similar concept to earlier, jumping up over the top of the DB in the corner. Despite being 6 foot, he's clearly got some great hops to him, but it's the tracking that I'm interested in. And for the most part, it's very good. There just are the occasional play like this, so where it end up slipping through the fingers. And then this one stood out to me. This is against Trayvon Diggs, Alabama, who's able to just stay in front of the speedy wide receiver and play it like a wideout, hauling in an interception. There's not much that Watkins can do there, and that to me is a little worrying, because I wasn't overly high on Diggs. He gave me some Ronald Darby vibes. You get to the NFL, he might not be a starter right away, and you look at that rating competition, how much difference will that press coverage play for a man like Quez Watkins? How much will those concentration issues like here, where he fumbles a touchdown, come back and haunt Quez Watkins? And I'd like to think that they won't. I'd like to think that with Aaron Moorhead around, he'll be able to kind of get the best out of him him. We know he idolizes Deshaun Jackson. He'll be in a room with him, Marquise Goodwin, John Hightower, Jalen Reagor. There's a lot of positive influences around him that can bring the best out of his game. And at worst, I think he definitely has upside as a special teams player on punt returns and that kind of thing. At best, I do think there's going to be a beginning of a slot upside, someone that almost, and I hate to say it, reminds me a little bit of a slightly faster Jordan Matthews, who can be aggressive over the middle, who would be able to leverage space in the seam, and then maybe transition outside should that opportunity ever arise. But I do think he's got something there. He's clearly got the speed. He's clearly got the ability to climb the rungs of the ladder and high point those balls. Where I'd like to see improvement, though, is that blocking's really non-existent. I think physicality in the stem of the route and generating that separation for a player of that speed in particular should be a lot better. And I also think that the consistency of those attributes need to be there as well. But what do you think, guys? Where do you stand on Quez Watkins? Let me know in the comment section down below. From myself, Liam Jenkins, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'll see you again soon.